Welcome back to the Pathfinders podcast. I'm your host, Pete Schramm, and we're going to talk about two main things on the show today. Career maps, the what you've done, past, present, future, broken down into 5 different dimensions, and the who helped you and guided you along the way, your personal board of advisors, your multiple mentors. We might refer to this as a PBA as we go. So please listen along, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and we will also post this on LinkedIn. Provide comments as you're listening through, because that's how we build up the community so others can learn from some of our insights, perspectives, and experiences, almost like we're a peripheral mentor or guide to those that are also engaging with the content. Our favorite quote for our guest today: don't let best get in the way of better. Don't let best get in the way of better. Aaron Brown is a global talent acquisition thought leader with 20 years of experience. He's designed and implemented innovative solutions for the recruitment functions across multiple industries: software development, IT, healthcare, aerospace, and defense. He'll share some of our previous crossing of paths, financial systems, and pharmaceutical. We'll be sure to bring up our common friend, Frank Wittenauer, along the way. But before we bring Aaron up onto the stage, the fun fact that he once was going 125 miles an hour on his motorcycle, and then he realized how little of the tire was actually in touch with the road. So, Aaron, how fast are you traveling today?
Well, it depends. Am I in the Jersey Turnpike or am I in some back road in North Carolina?
This is not going to be recorded for legal purposes and probably will not be used against you in the court of law.
Right. I don't need them scoping out the car. Right. So.
Good to see it. And I think a quick fun story for the listeners of how we got connected through the common friend of Frank. How'd you meet Frank, and how have you been working with him putting together this job search group?
Man, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's been a lot of fun. So in 2000, right, when COVID hit, I was working up in New York City with IPG Media Brands, and that Thursday, everything came to a shutdown. We all went back to our respective places thinking that it was just a flu and we were going to be back in the office in a couple of weeks, right? And it didn't happen. We all continued to work respectively remotely, but eventually the layoffs came. And of course, the ad tech and the advertising world got hit really hard, as did talent acquisition. And Frank was part of a group that was led by Brett Feig, and it was basically recruiters helping recruiters. I mean, it was a really tough time for recruiters at that time. So we formed a little bit of a group that was, helping others land jobs, be introduced to where job leads were, pick up, fractional, type of interim work, whatever the case may be. And Frank and I circled back early last year, and he had resurrected that. He used recruiters helping recruiters as the blueprint, for a new organization called the HR Networking Team. And this is made up of over 350 people, all in human resource, with 2 common denominators. We're all in human resources, and 2, we're all on some type of job search because of an action that was outside of our control. And Frank has been leading this. We have about, we have about 60, 70, 80 people show up each week. We do interview practice sessions. You'd be amazed how many HR folks are absolutely intimidated by the interview process. For those of us in talent acquisition, it sometimes comes natural because we do so much of it, even if we're on the other side of the desk. But we do that. We do LinkedIn skills endorsements. We have an open office hours meeting on Thursdays where you can come and just participate and not even talk about your job search. And it's engaging. People have found it very helpful. And the coolest stat, we have a LinkedIn private group, but the coolest stat, Pete, is that of those 350, about 130, 140 have actually landed. So, I don't know that Frank's the type of person. He's so modest and humble. I don't know that he would take credit, for that being the end game. But it's certainly those who participated, I think, got a lot out of it and wound up landing in either a contract or a full-time role. And I think that's just a cool step.
So thanks to Frank Wittenauer again for bringing us together and bringing it's closer to now that we're listening to this, right? Closer to 500 people.
Yes, I saw that
This.
the other day. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely nuts, and probably over again by the time listening to this, over 150 people landing. So reach out to Aaron, reach out to Frank, reach
Yeah.
out to me if you are somebody in the HR people space or even tangential, right? Looking for a job. It's just
Yeah.
great people coming together. And there's a lot of exciting things coming in 2025. So we'll get back to that.
Yes.
Follow them on social media. But we're back to the Pathfinders podcast, Aaron.
Okay. Cool.
So growing up, what'd you want to be? Was it a motorcycle driver?
Absolutely not. I
No.
mean, I grew up the son of a basketball coach. So I know that's close to your heart. Dad was born in French Lick. He's a Hoosier, a farm boy who went to school at Indiana State. So yes, if you're connecting the dots, two families are related by Larry's first marriage, I think, which was a kind of a not many people knew about it in college, but he married into a Condra family, which is my grandmother's side of the family in French Lick. And so I grew up, I was a gym rat. Dad was a high school basketball coach up in Ashland, Kentucky. Ashland, New Hampshire. And I was always around the game and thought that I was going to grow up and do that. But things changed. He's 6'5". I'm 6'3". I've always had to look up at my dad. Even my little brother was taller than me. At 6'4". But bottom line is, then I got into school and wanted to really, I think, become an architectural engineer. But advised along the way, and I think it was probably my old drawing teacher, said, that's going to be a really tough industry to get into. And Dad had another, teacher really kind of steer me towards mechanical engineering, and that's what I wound up going to school for, New Hampshire Tech. My undergrad or at least my associates, was in mechanical engineering, and then one later years adult learning to finish off my undergrad. But that was followed it. And of course, never did a bit of engineering after I fell into recruiting, like so many of us.
It's remarkable how there's so many similarities between your story and my story, Aaron.
Yes.
You're
Oh,
definitely
you sure we're not brothers? I got a lot more gray than you. I got to be the older brother.
Around the basketball background, the figuring out I wanted to be an architectural engineer, right? I was only going to go to Penn State and follow in the because that's there's no other college in the Schramm household growing up, right? Even if somebody gave you free tickets to a Pitt football or Pitt basketball game, no, you say no to those things unless it's Pitt playing Penn State and you're going to wear blue and white. But I too said architectural engineering's not for me.
Yeah.
And went to study mechanical engineering twice and never had a mechanical engineering role.
Oh, really?
The
I didn't know that, Pete.
No.
How did that never come up before?
No. It taught me how to think.
Yes.
Probably similar for you. And it taught you were, a little bit of a engineering anomalies in the regard of we're not supposed to be able to really interact and engage and develop people super well. But, that led us from engineering to HR, by means and ways of Lockheed Martin as well. So I think that's, pretty cool. And then both in the Pennsylvania area at various times of the year. So even more of those common connections going along the way. So you studied engineering, and then you talked to us about some of the jobs you applied for. So while you're getting the technical degree, what kind of things are you thinking that you want to do upon graduation?
Yeah. Well, again, another, I don't know whether it's a funny story, but it was just a sign of the times. This is back during the oil embargo. I had an offer out at Pratt & Whitney in Hartford, where a lot of my buddies were going. And my dad got sick of shoveling in the middle of a nor'easter in New Hampshire and said, we're going west. We're moving to Phoenix. And I got the guilt trip about not following them, about staying behind. So I figured, hey, fifth largest city in the country, there's got to be opportunity out there, right? And get out there, and it really was an economic depression, at the time. The best job I could find was a PCB assembler, minimum wage as a job shopper at Sperry Flight Systems. And I just happened to answer an advertisement for an executive recruiter. It was a little boutique firm, come to find out later, out of Scottsdale, that was really their clientele was in the semiconductor industry, RCA, Fairchild, semiconductor, places like that. And I'm in the middle of the interview, and Bill Lickey is looking at my resume and goes, "Oh, I see you played baseball in college. You know, our softball team could use a right fielder." So, decades later, I'm doing the same thing. That's how I fell into recruiting. But I will tell you.
How'd the softball team do?
I was stuck in right field in the bench. I mean, I wasn't anything great in school, being a natural basketball player, and then kind of, hey, I'm going to go try skiing. I'm going to go try basketball. I'm going to go do whatever I can, and get away from, the restrictions I think my parents were putting on me. But I will say, that the mechanical engineering really did help me be able to talk the language to software engineers, to engineers in general. I think mechanical engineers are normal, people, and we probably have the gift of communication and interaction and more interpersonal skills than others. That's just me being a little biased. I don't know about you. And I was able to, talk with a lot of the folks that I was recruiting, and just kind of became a natural at it. Years later, I kind of went through the job shops, of Southern California, when I decided that job versus commission wasn't for me anymore.
Yeah.
And as I was providing consultants to Martin Marietta out of Monterey, their Fleet Numerical Oceanography Center, they liked the way I was servicing their account. They said, "Hey, we've got a job as an HR rep at JPL in Pasadena, one of our clients. You want to come over?" And that was my break into the corporate world. But I learned the art of recruiting as a headhunter, and that's how I got my start into the corporate world.
Yeah, and just for a little bit of history lessons here for everybody, most of our listeners have probably heard of Lockheed Martin. That
Yep.
was formed from Martin Marietta and the Lockheed Aerospace Company. And Glenn Martin, actually, he was around the times of, the Wright brothers. And I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
you know this. You probably know this story.
Oh yeah.
Brothers, Aaron, right? The Wright brothers said, "Hey, Glenn, let's work on a project together and build these airplanes and these flying machines." And he said, "Well, that's cool, guys, but I'd like my flying machines to take off and land from water." And that's why the Middle River Lockheed Martin
Is the water airplanes? Yeah.
Exactly. And the Wright brothers said, "Dude, you're too crazy for us. You go ahead and do your own thing." And he did. And that's why the facilities, Martin State Airport's right there. They literally would build the planes, they'd push them out onto the water, and then they'd build a whole bunch of other stuff in that facility. It just recently closed down, actually, Aaron, in that location. But that's
at the old Baltimore location. Yep.
Yep.
I got to tell you a fun fact, and this is something that always amazed me. Now that you brought up the Wright brothers and Martin Marietta, certainly I was there in the era of the space shuttle. I was in Southern California recruiting in the aerospace world for Hughes and Northrop and Lear Sigler and places like that when the Challenger accident happened. But how you connect the new world with the old world is the entire flight of the Wright brothers plane could have happened inside the external fuel tank of the space shuttle. That's how big that was.
Whoa.
And it was just an interesting flight and how you connect that. And I don't know if you've kept up on, with aerospace and stuff like that, but they still have the Mars planes, the Martin Mars planes, doing water fighting. Matter of fact, I think the Mars Philippines is just being ferried from up in the northern hemisphere down south, for the winter. It's still flying, if you can believe that, as a water bomber.
That's cool. It's a piece of who I am. And
Yes.
anytime I talk about Lockheed Martin, I still say we, us, our, even though I've now been gone longer than I was there, which is weird to think about. But this is about you, not me. So let's talk a little bit more. At some point you said, all right, I'm going to leave, Lockmart, as some of our DARPA brothers call it, or, Mother Lockheed. And who was helping guide you from position to position, kind of role to role? Did you have a
Yeah.
couple of folks that you confided in along the way before, during, after those transitions, Aaron?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, the first was the guy who hired me, Bill Dalton. He was in Denver, an HR leader, and he was with Martin Marietta for years before I arrived. I think he actually started in either Baltimore or Orlando, and then wound up for the longest time leading human resources for the technology services division. And then when Martin acquired GE Aerospace in '93, he was one of the 15 or so of us that relocated from Denver out to Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And then I think he went on to Albuquerque. And then, unbeknownst to me, he left the organization for I think CH2M Hill, but I think at least 30 years or so with the Martin Marietta Company. And I mean, he just became an immediate mentor. And I remember golfing with him one time. He's like, Bill, why did you hire me? You were looking for that recruiter and that HR rep, off-site, for JPL for that TSEP program, the technical support effort personnel. And he said, because you just worked hard. He says, I saw how many candidates you were submitting. TSEP contract was a contract vehicle for the 750 subcontract, personnel that Pasadena, that JPL Pasadena had at any given moment. And that work was split up amongst probably about a dozen or so subcontract organizations. And so I'd had history with it before with another, contract house. But then Martin Marietta decided to get into that business, and they saw it as a footstep into JPL. He says, I can't remember the number he quoted, but he said the number of people you had submitted for those statements of work. He says, I just realized that you knew the contract really well. You knew the personnel in that Pasadena area, and you just worked hard. And he wound up becoming a lifetime mentor and good friend. Knew his daughters really well. He's still up in Idaho. We still stay in touch. It was his wife Donna's birthday yesterday. Oh. And he's just one of those people that will be a lifelong mentor forever. I can always pick up the phone and know that Bill is always going to be there. So, which is really cool.
That's remarkable. And there's probably plenty of other instances throughout your life and professional journey where it starts off as a friend, turns into mentor, guide, and the friendship, continues to strengthen. We've mentioned a couple of other names on the call already, today. Some absolutely remarkable people. Now let's talk about this piece of kind of how do we put together your map, your plan. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, we talk a lot about the career map aspect. We break it up into the 5 dimensions, the positions, the skills, education, achievements, and some of the fun stuff along the way. So how were you navigating what you wanted to do? And maybe you didn't really have much of a plan whenever you're putting the PCBs together, but as you started, helping develop others, were there certain things that you looked for in your executive talent acquisition roles along the way where you're like, if I want to keep climbing the ladder, I probably need to do this, this, this. How did you navigate that strategic roadmap for your growth?
Yeah, I think, I provided the hunger, right? I was hungry for additional responsibility and being recognized for, the yeoman's level efforts that I was doing on some major programs. Early in those days, for example, we won the Air Force Network Support Program, which was operating the 13 remote satellite tracking stations across the globe. And I was part of that proposal team and that bid team, hired, searched and found all of the key personnel, waited around for us to win the darn thing, and then had to staff it. Providing representative resumes up front. Same thing, for example, with the EPA National Computer Center, one of the really big contracts that Martin Marietta Technical Services won at that time, that kind of put us on the map in the professional services world. And then the last really, and that was about 600 people that we had to hire in 90 days in North Carolina and Washington and Bay City, Michigan. Again, being part of that bid team and that proposal team. So it's not often you could say I was there from the start to the very end and participated in every aspect of that contract. key personnel. Key personnel came off. The thing wound up getting protested, I think, by CSC. Had to wait around for that. Had to keep key personnel warm. And then wound up implementing the strategic plan, that we had put together, as well as hire the additional folks in addition later on down the road. And then the last really big one, it was on that same size, that 400 or 500 person size, was running the outside defense at DOE Hanford up in Richland, Washington. Another contract that we had taken over from an incumbent that we had won competitively, and having to hire all those folks, hundreds of people, convert incumbent employees over to our payroll, find new hires to replace them, having to understand that area geographically and from a labor perspective. And Bill was with me through all those times. He was the HR leader. I was his recruiting supervisor. I remember down in Raleigh when we won that EPA contract, we were actually rooming together in the Residence Inn. That's, and then you get some downtime and you're playing poker with all the guys, down on the river, on the Columbia River. And it was just, while I didn't have a plan, I guess I worked my tail off. People saw the potential and they put the plan in place for me, and presented me with those opportunities. I don't think it was anything that I had consciously done, or planned, but, that may be the takeaway from having, your personal board of advisors, is they're looking out for you. They see the potential, and while you may not consciously be looking, for a specific path, whether it's vertical or horizontal, they're going to take care of that path for you.
I think that's huge. I get asked a lot of questions, Aaron, along the way around, hey, I'm a job seeker and I'm looking at this, job. Can you give us a little bit of guidance on this front? Are you okay if you're, staffing your talent acquisition, right, at a small, medium, large size organization? If I, as the job seeker, follow you on LinkedIn, maybe
Mm-hmm.
send you a message and say, hey, I'm interested in exploring opportunities at your organization. Maybe I'm following some of your content,
Right.
helping connect the dots. I'm making you aware that I am interested in working at your company. I
Mm-hmm.
am here. Keep me in mind. And so many folks, whenever I say, hey, try this out, they haven't, come back and said they've been yelled at yet, but you've been there, done that,
Yep.
could write the book on this. Maybe you will write on this topic at some point. But share a little bit of, if you were to put yourself on the other side of the table for a second, what kind of tips or tricks would you say is do's? And then what are some of the, don't do this. This will piss me off if you do that stuff.
Yeah. The greatest form of flattery is to have a fan base, right? Or people that are following you, or taking the time to give you a personal note, on why they want to connect. And part of it is just plain paying it forward. I've been extremely fortunate in my career, to have worked for some large companies and been given some unbelievable tasks and challenges. And, some of which have been lessons learned. Some of them have been, just incredibly significant achievements that I'm very proud of. So I'd like to think that I'm in a position to mentor others who are considering the same thing. But if there's anything consistent the way I've tried to lead my life, whether I'm in a search mode, because God knows, the TA leaders have been hit hard over the last, probably 10, 15 years as well. It's don't be afraid to connect with people that you don't know.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to reach out to a CEO or an HR leader. Introduce yourself. Why you're connecting with them. You got to personalize it somehow. Don't just send a connection request without hitting that little box on the left that says add a note. That means that you're just shortcutting. You're being a minimalist, and that's where I kind of lose interest. But if someone is taking the time, they're investing their personal time to connect with me, damn well right, I'm going to reach out to them.
And they did a little bit of homework before they
And
added
they did
that
some
note.
homework.
That's a big piece. And I'd say there's extra bonus points and a gold star if you can find a common connection,
Yeah.
or say, hey, I was just talking to Frank Wittenauer and, Aaron,
Yeah.
I see you're at such and such
Something
organization.
they both have in common.
Yep, exactly.
Something that, it's just like those connections requests are just like the job search.
Yeah.
You got nanoseconds to usually capture their attention, because their attention span can be measured in nanoseconds. And you've got just like recruiters spend 10 seconds at the most looking at a resume. In those 10 seconds, you got to somehow grab their attention to put you in that pile that they want to call. Same thing with connecting with folks that could potentially be incredible mentors to you down the road. You got to come across as personal. Whether it's you have something in common, but you got a couple seconds to do that for them to hit the request and to even respond. So those are, don't be afraid to ever do that. And why do you do that? One of the dirtiest little secrets about recruiting is, who are those folks that can consider first? And you're one of thousands, who may be applying to a job. How do you assure yourself that you stand out? Well, consider how recruiters actually work. What are the first two categories of people they're going to look at? They're going to look at internals and they're going to look at referrals. So if you somehow capture the attention of a CEO and they send a message off to the recruiting leader or the HR leader and say, hey, bring this person in or talk to them, qualify them. Hey, don't do anything abnormal, but at least check them out, because I like what they did. Those are the first few folks who are going to get called. And, we used to call them in Martin Marietta. I don't know if you remember Mike Camardo or not, but when we were at Cherry Hill, we used to call them FOMs. They were friends of Mike, and friends of Mike, you did not just kind of put off into be done, sometime later. You immediately, got a hold of that person because you knew at some point Mike was going to follow up and say, hey, what's the status of that resume I sent you? Or at least his admin would, and if you didn't, man, you were in trouble. But that's how things happen in reality.
Mm-hmm. Let's shift gears before I ask you about some of these concepts inside an organization. I know you and a couple of others in our group talk a lot about AI and what to expect, what to watch out for. Give us like a 30 to 60 second kind of forecast of, hey, what do I need to know? What do I need to be thinking about whenever it comes to AI in this people space? And I'd say even for leadership in general.
Yeah, I have spent a lot of time trying to formulate what my position is on AI. I've attended conferences. I've listened to the Secretary of Labor.
And remember, the recording here, just like you're speeding on the motorcycle, will probably not be used in the court of law. This will also
exactly.
not stand up.
And hey, I've had to embrace technology my entire career. But one of my second favorite quotes from the one that you mentioned, and from the same guy, is that technology is only an enabler to a more efficient process. So I think it's our help. The way that AI has been sold, to human resources and in specifically talent acquisition, is it's going to make your job easier. It's going to make it more efficient, so that you can spend more time exercising your consultative skills, with the clients. Maybe more time training, more time doing interview training, maybe more time doing that deeper qualification of your finalist candidates. Maybe more time optimizing your tech stack or your workflow, or being able to qualify more candidates. Now, if that's the case, it's just making the process easier and more efficient. It's not trying to take our job over. Then I'm an absolute fan. And where I align with the Secretary of Labor is that we should not use it for a hired decision. And I think this thing it's the horse is out of the barn. I think they can't get the horse back in the barn. We're going to see a lot of, I think, legislation, that will govern how AI is used in human resources. And I'm okay with everything that we've talked about. Actually, matter of fact, Pete, it's actually eliminated a job within talent acquisition already, the role of the coordinator. You got Calendly, you've got automatic scheduling, you got automatic offer letter generators. I think that job's gone, except for maybe the people doing C-suite type of recruiting. And I don't think that's ever coming back, but it happened because of automation. It wasn't a decision. It was an administrative type of task. It was a repetitive type of task. Now, the gray area, that I think you're familiar with, that Frank and I and others are talking about, in my opinion, is there is another decision that that AI is making for us, and nobody's talking about it. And that is the decision to interview, right? Or the decision to screen that candidate in. If you're relying solely on AI, I think you're going to be in trouble. And yet no one's talking about what the implications or the risk is of that. And that's what this group is really trying to identify is, hey, we accept the fact that, it's an enabler to a more efficient process. But what are the risks to talent acquisition? For example, I think the OFCC definition of an internet applicant could be completely redefined because of AI. And I just, I think where it's going to conflict, where there's going to be just an absolute headbutt is candidates are, I think, still want, that white glove type of treatment. At least some candidates, if I'm hiring an LPN and RN and all I care about is whether they're credentialed and whether they're willing to work for the amount of money I'm willing to offer, I don't need to see them. Get them into the automatic onboarding process, right? Because that industry is that desperate for that type of skill set. Now, if you're talking, a white collar engineer, administrative professional, executive, they don't want to be, they don't want an application process that is completely automated. They want to talk to a real person.
Yeah.
I could take any one of my senior recruiters, that I've had in the past, and I know that they can look at a resume and go, you know what, it doesn't have the keywords in here, but the context of what they're discussing or what they're trying to present suggests that they could be a candidate for this job. So I definitely want to talk to them. AI can't do that. And that's where I've drawn the line so far. And I could be convinced otherwise. It's so new. But that's where I've drawn the line on my position on it so far.
So stay tuned for more details. Definitely follow Aaron and keep in touch with that. Now, we're working with a little bit of AI on the Latitude front, and we talk a lot about career maps and personal boards. And, we won't go down a whole product overview on this episode of the podcast. Maybe that's a good one for an upcoming show soon. But today, I want to hear more about what you think of the value inside an organization. Hey, maybe we're back at Lockheed Martin, right? Where do you see the value of that career map and personal board of advisors, whenever we incorporate that methodology, right? Tech or no tech, but let's just talk about those concepts, how important and beneficial that is to our workforce, now, specifically.
Well, I mean, I think in any role, and especially in the company where you and I still bleed Lockheed Martin blue, you're going to have those that, see your potential and are looking out for you. You're going to have folks that you just naturally associate with who may be in your career path, who, just like we have onboarding buddies, and like we have job search buddies, maybe. I mean, we all need that type of network. And it may not be somebody who has been formally assigned to you as a mentor. It could be just other people, that want to see you succeed. So one, I think it's really important to surround yourself with those. And in most cases, in a large corporation, you're going to have a plethora of opportunity for that versus, I think, a small company. But it doesn't mean to, and I think you probably pointed this out at some point, your mentor doesn't need to be within your own company. It could be an external, mentor or a personal board of advisors. I learned really hard work ethic, working during the summers in high school, for a building supply company in Newport, New Hampshire. I was brooming out on my last day of the summer job. I was brooming out the garage, and the owner, Harold Valley, walks up and says, "Hey, I want you to come back next summer." Okay, other people are gonna see that effort. Now, when you get into a formal program like I did with Gary Barbosa and Terry Powell being another big advocate besides Bill Dalton, they are going to pull you aside and create opportunities for you to succeed, and then they're going to give you those tools to be successful. They're going to teach you what leadership is about. They're going to teach you. But more importantly, they're going to present you with those opportunities. They're going to position you, for those types of opportunities. Whether for like me, it was leading an entire task force for staffing, in the old, information and services sector of Lockheed Martin, where we took on the task of centralizing all of our sourcing effort whether it be job fairs or newspaper advertisements, or whatever the case, so that we could save money tactically. But then Terry came back and said, Aaron, I want you to take it to the next level. I want you to really consider putting together a brick and mortar regional recruiting center. And it was a cool story. I mean, we had 18 businesses operating in and around the Washington, D.C. area. And as it turns out, Norm Augustine, as the story goes, was opening up a Sunday Washington Post. And he says, why the hell are we advertising for the same people? Why are our business units competing for the same talent? Why are you guys out competing one another on offers for the same talent? He just saw a waste. And I think he probably tagged Terry, and it rolls downhill. Terry tagged me, and we came up with the idea or the concept of a regional recruiting center concept, where we had a center where recruiters were housed. It was along any type of mass transportation that people could easily get there. You come in and you interview with 3 or 4 different businesses in the morning, and then they go into a war room decision that afternoon and make a decision on whether you'll hire. So we accomplished a number of things at the same time. We cut the first contact to offer alert down to 5.1 days. It was unbelievable. We taught all of our hiring managers. It was called interviewing a strategic approach, based on a class that Dr. Richard Camp was teaching out at University of Michigan's Executive Education School, so that people were being assessed the same way. And then we had that war room decision. We wanted to make decisions right away. And the coolest thing that I saw come out of that, because we're consistent in how we assessed and interviewed people, was that, a manager could walk into that decision meeting that afternoon, not having seen that person, that candidate, but listen to the assessment that was being vocalized and make a decision to hire because they knew that it was consistent. And that was nirvana. I mean, I don't know that it was like lightning in a bottle. I don't know that you can ever replicate something like that. And the theory was that we had 60 business units, underneath Lockheed Martin. Hey, we didn't care how we got them, but that we got them. Northrop Grumman didn't, or Raytheon didn't, and we got them underneath the same roof, where then you could use internal mobility for that person to be able to transfer from one business unit to another. And it was just, as you look back now, you may have had one of those significant achievements in your lifetime. For me, that was probably one of them.
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
Augustine's Way.
Augustine's Ways, yes. Yeah. That's in my library too, yes.
Good reminder. Go check out that book, everybody, after you read Pathfinders, of course.
Yes.
So you want to give us one quick bit of advice, and then I'll do a quick recap here for us and close things out.
That was this is going to sound maybe a little corny, but it does apply to the topic we're talking about. Sitting outside in our backyard in North Carolina maybe 6 months ago, and my daughter, who just turned 16, and she's well on her way to career pathing, she goes, Dad, now that I'm adulting, what kind of advice would you give me as your 26-year-old daughter? And man, I was not expecting that. It's like, hold on a second, time out, Keely. I'm in the middle of a Guinness. I gotta, go off and think about, this advice I'm going to give you, right? And I thought I did pretty good, which was be happy with what you've got. And the reason I say that, it may sound like I said, oversimplified, but I can't tell you how many people I've talked to in this respective job search, in that team that Frank and I are part of, where a new member is coming aboard, and maybe they've got 2 or 3 years, as an HR leader for a startup, and just an introductory call, getting to know them a little better. Let's say that, my aspirations are, I expect to be a CHRO, or a chief people officer. And it's like, man, you haven't even gone through comp, you haven't even gone through benefits, you haven't gone through performance management. Be a little bit more realistic about this. If you say that in an interview, someone may just kick you out because, you've got a little ways to go before you're ready for something like that. Take those steps. Get yourself a personal board of advisors. Invest. I don't see you have to I don't see you have to do your time, which used to be, how you do that, right? Because everyone has a different level of learning and how quickly they learn and how quickly they achieve, certain certain significant achievements in their lives and their careers. I'm not saying that person can't be there, but hey, dial it down a little bit, and in some respects, be happy with what you have. And I guess nowadays, when you see people struggling financially, whether it be in a job or not, I mean, everyone knows that your lifestyle is relative to your level of income. So don't always be chasing that purple squirrel or that shiny object. It'll come, like it did for me, because I had other people looking out for me.
And I think that's the piece, and I talk about it in the book of SMARTY goals, SMARTY, and a lot of us forget about the why, making sure that they're
Yeah.
yours. Right. A lot of those are just, oh, I saw this on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, or wherever else. And they say, oh, so-and-so is doing that. That's what I need to achieve in order to say that I've checked the box of success, happiness, and joy in life and that I've made it. And that's where the mentors, guides, and advisors are so critical. I might have something of, greatness, but is that really, what goodness and success looks like to me? So,
Yep.
Aaron, thanks for joining us today. Go read through a couple of notes here, talking about hoop dreams of engineering to HR and people, flying high in talent acquisition, but no longer speeding on his motorcycle. We got connected through the writer of the first words in my book, Pathfinders, which was Frank Wittenauer. The group's nearly 500 people, and over 150 have landed in jobs by the time you're listening to this. Aaron grew up in Hoosier Hoops family and aspired to be an architectural engineer, and he totally followed in my footsteps as a mechanical engineer in school. Connecticut, then migrated west to Arizona. He was a PCB assembler and then on a whim dove into executive recruiting and forgot to leave after a couple of decades. Fun paths crossing at Martin Marietta, and had a great mentor in Bill in the Denver area, and they both relocated out to Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Lots of overlap in our stories, but the tip that you shared, right? Work hard and excel at what you're tasked with. And those mentors that are turned friends, sometimes mentors again, right? You stayed hungry and you found that the best mentors believe in each of us, and they help us build our paths out whenever we don't necessarily have it. Another helpful hint to reach out and add a note proactively if you are in that job seeker phase of your professional journey. Make it personal, find a common ground. And you might say, oh my gosh, yes, that's so simple. But ask yourself, how often are you actually doing that? Stay authentic, stay top of mind. And then we transition to technology only as a support to an efficient part of a process so that we can better utilize our time on those things where people are definitely needed. So AI's here, embrace it. Stay tuned for more from Aaron, Frank, and legislation. Board building is big, and the Buddy is a great place to start. Good guidance and allow other people to develop, your advisors outside of your organization. So we're here as HR and people leaders, and we can't afford to not invest in our people and guide them to be happy with what they got today.
That's great summary. No, thank you very much, Pete, for having me on, and for kind of pitching what Frank and I are doing as well. And I'm sure you and I are going to stay in touch quite a bit.